They planted a fence through my Saturday like it was an idea, not my yard. The cedar smelled clean and righteous. The line it cut across my grass didn't. I don't raise my voice often, but I own a better tool than volume. Iron in the ground, and ink on a page. I heard the thump before I saw it, the hollow, rubbery whomp of a post driver meeting wood. The sound rose under my kitchen window, nudging my coffee toward a tremor. When I stepped outside, the morning had a tang of fresh sawn, cedar and earth. 3 men in bright vests worked like a metronome, auger bites, shovel scrapes, driver falls. Between the hydrangeas and the rosemary bed, a line of new fence posts marched at a slant across my grass toward the retention basin the HOA calls Tract C, and we all call the Mosquito Bowl. "Hold up," I said, walking barefoot through, dew that freckled my ankles. "Where's your line?" The foreman, sunburned nose, wedding ring glinting as he lifted the driver, nodded at a string of orange flags fluttering like weak excuses. "We're building the perimeter per HOA stakes," he said. "See those? Board wants the fence straight with the basin. Less maintenance." The flags ran 3 feet inside my lawn, then 5 like a careless creek. I knew where my boundary sat the way you know the edge of your own skin. When we poured the patio 2 years ago, a surveyor found the capped iron pins at my back corners and tapped them with a hammer like a doctor testing reflexes. I'd watched the bubble float to level and learned the shape of my lot in a way that doesn't leave you. "You're on my property," I said, not loud, just true. A white SUV eased up along the curb and disgorged a woman in a linen blazer carrying a clipboard and a smile with policies behind it. "Hi, Bevan," she said. "I'm on the board. Great to meet you. This fence will define the common area and keep kids away from the basin. It's a safety and aesthetics issue." "It's on my lawn," I said, pointing to the rosemary, now leaning like shocked hair. "That's an ownership issue." "It's a de minimis overlap," she said, trying the phrase on me like a pair of sunglasses. "And the HOA has broad authority for common improvements. We'll make it lovely." She gestured toward a rendering on her clipboard, a tidy fence hugging an obedient property line that existed only in someone's software. The paper was a devotion to straightness. The ground, I knew, bent. The foreman set another post. The auger coughed up root and soil. The smell of the earth was so rich it felt like an accusation. It was the soil where my wife, Kara, grew zinnias last summer when the chemo made her crave color like bread. It was where our dog had chosen to sleep when the afternoons were too bright for people. It was ours not in the paper sense first, but in the human one. Bodies having been here honestly. I don't love fighting. It leaves a metallic taste I can't rinse. But there are moments when your throat learns a new word for no that feels like backbone. I went inside and slid the manila folder from the cabinet above the fridge. It thudded the table like a promise. Deed with my name, title policy, the recorded plat for Whisper Oaks Phase 2, my boundary survey with a coffee ring on the corner. The plat's hatch said the basin lived beyond a thin strip of HOA land, Tract C, running like ribbon. Between us, my lot's west line was a bearing and a distance, not a suggestion. I took a tape measure, a hand trowel, a can of blue marking paint, and a coil of neon mason line from the garage. In my head, I heard my father, who realigned more than one fence in his life by talking to dirt and iron. "Trust the pins," he'd say. "Everything else is a rumor." At the back corner by the camellia, I knelt and dug where memory told me iron slept. 2 inches down, my fingers clinked against a capped rod. I brushed the cap clean. The stamp read like a signature, LS 6321. I tied the neon to it, walked to the opposite corner, and found its twin under the spirea, the cap cold and certain in my palm. When I stretched the string taut between them, it sang, a thin, bright note the same color as resolve. The posts the crew had set stood north of that line like trespassers trying to look like guests. Bevan's phone chimed. She glanced, pursed, her lips in the universal language of inconvenient facts, and said, "Let's not slow progress over inches. We'll plant lavender on your side as a gesture." "Move the posts," I said. The words surprised me with how even they were. She tucked the clipboard tighter against her ribs. "Email management," she said. "We'll review." "I will," I said, "while you move the posts." I snapped photos, the caps, the pins, the string humming like a fixed idea, the posts planted in my grass like someone else's flag. Then I printed the plat and highlighted the bearing with a yellow so loud it looked like it would shout into court. When the crew broke for lunch, I pushed my own stakes in at 10-foot intervals along the line and painted the grass a blue they couldn't ignore. By the time they came back, my yard had a spine you could see. If they wanted a fence, they would have one. It just wouldn't be built on my memory, my zinnias, or my deed. Tomorrow, I'd take the paper to the county and the city if I had to. Tonight, I'd tie one more knot in a string that knew where I ended and the world began. By noon, the posts looked less like a project and more like a dare. The neon line I'd stretched from cap to cap hummed in the breeze, a bright, thin truth cutting through cedar and confidence. The foreman kept his crew busy on the far end near the basin, eyes sliding past my blue paint like it was graffiti and not a boundary. I took the folder, slid it under my arm the way you carry a baby you don't intend to drop, and drove to the county. The recorder's office is where arguments go to meet their ancestors. Fluorescence hummed. A woman with a copper braid and a nameplate that read M. Hollis asked what I needed. "Whisper Oaks, Phase 2, I said, "recorded plat, any boundary adjustments, and the tract map for Tract C." She unrolled Mylar on a light table, and the neighborhood rose in bones. Lots, bearings, distances, hatches. "There," she said, pencil tapping the thin ribbon that separated my rectangle from the basin. "Tract C, HOA. Note 8, maintenance and drainage only. No expansion of tract lines without recorded lot line adjustment." She followed the west edge of my lot with the care you give a vein. "Your line is N 88 degree 5940, W 103 feet. That's your fence, not the HOA's wish list." I wrote down instrument numbers like they were coordinates to a life raft. The plat, the CC&Rs, a 2014 common area fence permit pulled 2 streets over, which noted, bless some past inspector's insistence, owner responsible for verifying property lines, encroachment onto private lots prohibited. Hollis printed the plat and circled my lot in red. "People get creative with straight lines," she said. "Paper doesn't." City Hall was 2 blocks over and smelled like old carpet and late. Decisions. A planner named Rowe hit a few keys and shook her head. "No fence permit on file for Whisper Oaks perimeter this year," she said. "HOA built a section around the pool last spring. This is new. If they're within their tract, fine. On your lot, that's a civil encroachment. On drainage easement, we'll care." She handed me a business card and a form that said code complaint in utilitarian font. "We'll send someone to look," she said. "Photos help." On the way home, I caught a red light and the chemo summer came up like heat from asphalt. Kara, in a headscarf, hands dirty with zinnia seeds, laughing at the audacity of flowers. I had promised her borders we could trust. Not just fences, but the kind of keeping in and keeping out that lets you rest. My throat made a shape like prayer without the words. Back in the yard, I found the east cap with my eyes closed, the way you do when you've learned a thing by feel. I tied another length of neon line to it and ran a cross-check, because stubborn needs a friend named certainty. The posts were still wrong. The crew avoided my gaze. Bevan reappeared, clipboard now, accessorized with a pair of sunglasses that made everything look like it belonged to her. "We've consulted counsel," she announced, which was impressive given that she'd been gone 40 minutes. "The HOA is authorized to maintain common boundaries. We're minimizing encroachment." "Minimizing is not erasing," I said, and handed her copies. the plat with the ribbon of Tract C clearly not swollen to swallow my lawn, the city note about owner responsibility to verify lines, a photo of LS 6321's cap under my camellia. This is a notice of encroachment and demand to cease, I added, not theatrical, just precise. Remove the posts on my lot today, build within Tract C, or stop until we meet with a surveyor. She took the papers like they might smudge her. Email management, she repeated, which is what people say when they've run out of new sentences. Already, did, I said, and tapped my phone. The subject line, HOA fence encroachment, notice to cease, felt like knocking with both fists. I CC'd the city planner for daylight. On cue, Mr. Cho from the corner shuffled over, ball cap in hand. "They inside your yard?" he asked, squinting at the blue line. "They tried that with me in '09. I made 'em pull 3 posts." He pointed at the basin. "That water rises. They'll say whatever keeps them dry." He signed the neighbor. Statement I'd printed, neat block letters like building a small bridge from his lot to mine. The foreman sidled up, hat in hand. "I didn't lay the flags," he said. "We dig where we're told. If you ask me to stop on your side, I'll stop. I can't pull what's set without permission." "I'm asking," I said, and he nodded, relief unclenching his jaw an inch. He called to his crew to work the far section. The posts in my grass stood like a mistake someone had paused mid-sentence. By late afternoon, Holly from Code pulled into the cul-de-sac in a white city car, clipboard matching Bevan's but with insignia that mattered. She walked the string, crouched at the cap, took photos like a chaplain taking confession. "No permit," she said, frowning. "If this is in Tract C, they're fine. If not, they're not. Either way, we don't like fence footings and drainage routes. I'll tag it for review. Don't let them set concrete." The sun slid toward the basin's brown water, and the posts threw long shadows that crossed my line without apology. I tied one more knot in the neon, snug as a promise, and texted a surveyor whose name came with the kind of recommendation you don't ignore. "Tomorrow, 8 a.m., she replied. "We'll shoot it and stamp it. The fence would have to learn to live where the ground said it belonged." Tonight I set the folder on the table next to a vase of drying zinnias and rested my palm on the paper until the anger softened into a plan. Paper doesn't lie. Iron doesn't move. In the morning, I'd bring someone who speaks both. Anna arrived at 7:58, the alley still cool, the air carrying that damp green smell lawns exhale before the sun makes them brittle. She lifted an orange tripod from her truck, legs snapping open with the confident clicks of someone who knows where down is. The total station perched on top like a yellow owl. "Morning," she said, eyes already mapping. "Show me your pins." I led her to the camellia corner. She brushed away soil with the flat of her hand, found the capped iron like an old friend. "LS 6321, she read. "Good." The instrument chirped awake. She called a backsite, set 0, and turned to my opposite corner. I held the prism rod, bubble-centered, feeling useful in a way that steadied me. The tripod beeped, polite and relentless. Numbers flashed, angles, distances, facts with no interest in anyone's blazer or clipboard. Anna flagged the line with lath and pink ribbon every 10 feet. My neon strings sang beneath it, twin truths in bright chorus. The new fence posts stood shy of that chorus by 2 feet here, 5 there, like guests who'd wandered into the wrong yard and were pretending not to notice. By 8:20, Bevan had materialized, linen blazer crisp, sunglasses turning her eyes into policies. Kendall from management trailed her, laptop balanced like a shield. The foreman gathered his crew to the far side, letting the numbers do the arguing. Mr. Cho took up a spot near my rosemary, hands on hips. I could feel my heartbeat. In my tongue, Anna didn't look up. "West boundary of Lot 19, N88 5940. W 103.00 feet, she said, pencil scratching in a field book that had seen rain and swearing. Fence posts at stations 14, 24, and 38 encroaching 2.7, 3.4, and 4.9 feet onto Lot 19, respectively. Footing holes prepped within drainage swale of Tract C. She glanced at me. Translation: they're on you, and they're flirting with the basin's do not disturb. Bevan went for a smile, found something thinner. We're improving. The common boundary, she said, as if enunciation could move iron. Council says the board has de minimis tolerance for encroachments. Council should say good morning to the plat, Anna answered, still gentle. De minimis is inches when you're painting a line in a garage, not feet when you're sinking cedar into someone's deed. Kendall cleared his throat. We can offer to landscape, move the posts, I said. My voice surprised me. It wasn't loud. It had edges. Holly from Code rolled up in her city car, clipboard at the ready. No permit on file, she said without apology. If you're in Tract C, you need a drainage review. If you're on his lot, you need to not be. She crouched at Anna's caps, took photos, and wrote down the instrument numbers like a liturgy. Do not set concrete, she added, looking straight at the foreman. He lifted his palms. We won't, not on his side. Anna finished her shots, then paced the basin edge, checking the ribbon of Tract C that the HOA's rendering had treated like clay. This tract is narrow, she said, tapping the hatch on her printout. You can have a straight fence or a correct fence here. Pick one. Bevan's sunglasses hid the flicker in her eyes, but I heard it in her voice. We'll need to confer with council. Anna rolled her field book closed and slid a folded sheet into my hand. A draft exhibit with my lot labeled, the line bold, the encroaching posts dotted like errors you can erase if you're brave. I'll stamp the final by noon, she said. PDF to you, the city, and if you want management. She turned to the foreman. If you pull those three and restring along my lath, your crew can keep moving. You'll avoid digging in the swale. The ground will thank you when it rains. The foreman looked at Bevan. Authority hung in the air like humidity, waiting to decide who got to breathe first. Bevan pressed her lips together into a shape that meant, not yet. I could feel the anger rising, the metallic taste of it, the way it makes your mouth a coin. I pictured Kara's zinnias where the cedar now marched, her insisting that color could be a protest against a bad season. I wanted to tell Bevan that you can't landscape over a theft, even if you plant lavender. Instead, I took a breath that felt like work and set my phone to camera. I photographed the caps, the lath, the posts, Holly's clipboard, Kendall's laptop, Bevan's careful posture. A record isn't the same as a fight, but it often wins one. By 10, the crew had drifted to the far side to set panels no one would argue with. By 11, Anna's stamped exhibit hit my inbox. Exhibit A, Boundary and Encroachment Sketch, Lot 19, Whisper Oaks, Phase 2. The seal in the corner made my shoulders drop a fraction, like a judge had nodded somewhere I couldn't. See? I forwarded it to Kendall and Bevan with a subject line that knocked, Encroachment Verified. Remove and realign today. I CC'd Holly. And because my title policy had been sitting in a drawer like a sleeping dog that could still bite, I sent it to the claims address with a short note. Encroachment by association fence. Please advise. At noon, the reply I expected landed, typed in the velvet of a law firm font. The association is acting within its authority to maintain common boundaries. Any overlap is minimal and will be addressed with plantings. We intend to proceed. Signed, some partner whose name sounded like an oak desk. I stared at the words until they blurred. Then I pulled out a notepad and wrote 3 lines. Iron doesn't move. Paper doesn't lie. We don't get smaller. Okay, I told the cedar, posts that had wandered into my Saturday. We'll ask a judge which line is true. The neon string hummed between caps like a promise it didn't need me to keep, but I would anyway. The title company called at 8:11 a.m., right between the coffee cooling and the foreman pretending not to see my blue paint. Mr. Hale, this is Chicago Title Claims. We've reviewed your submission. Clear encroachment onto your lot per the survey. We're appointing counsel. A second line clicked in, Nadia Shore, a voice steady as a level. I'll meet you at the courthouse at 1, she said. Bring the plat, Anna's stamped exhibit, your photos, and the city's no. Permit note. We'll ask for a stop work order. I printed everything twice. Slid it into a binder behind a tab I labeled simply Line. There was a photo of Kara tucked inside my deed, headscarf, dirt under her nails, zinnias like small suns. I tapped the edge of it with a finger the way you touch a talisman and whispered, "Wish me backbone." The courthouse smelled like toner and old carpet, paper and feet, my new elements. Nadia shook my hand in the hallway as if she'd known me before this mess. Short braid, flats, a suit that didn't try too hard. We're asking for a temporary restraining order, she said, flipping the binder open with a hand that turned pages like decisions. Standard, likelihood of success, irreparable harm, balance of equities. On land, courts don't love will plant lavender as a remedy. Inside, a bailiff said our names like a ship's bell. Hale v. Whisper Oaks Homeowners Association. Temporary. Restraining order. The HOA's lawyer, Keating, from the Oak Desk firm, adjusted his cufflinks like they were evidence. Nadia went first. Your Honor, the recorded plat places my client's west boundary at N 88-5940, W, 103 feet. The HOA's crew set posts 2 to 5 feet over that line into Lot 19. Our licensed surveyor's stamped exhibit shows encroachments at stations 14, 24, and 38. The city confirms no fence permit and flags drainage concerns if footings intrude on Track C's swale. We asked the court to enjoin further work on Lot 19 and to prevent concrete from being poured pending a hearing. When land is altered, the harm is irreparable. Keating slid his smile on like a glove. Your Honor, this is de minimis, a few inches in pursuit of community safety and maintenance efficiency. The association has broad authority to improve common boundaries. Plantings will make any slight overlap palatable. Moreover, the basin edge requires a straight line to prevent kids from slipping through gaps. The judge, a woman with silvering hair and readers low on her nose, lifted the plat. She traced the hatch of Tract C with a pen as if following a river she knew. Counsel, she said to Keating, de minimis is not a doctrine that gives you feet of someone else's land. Do you dispute the surveyor's findings? Keating's cufflinks caught light. We have not had time to commission our own survey. Nadia tapped Anna's seal with a nail. Licensed, stamped, tied to recorded, monuments. The judge looked at me. Mr. Hale, can you describe what's happened on the ground? They set posts over my line, I said, steady. I marked caps and strung line. The crew kept working on the far side, but the posts on my grass remain. My wife planted flowers where one of those holes is. The city told them not to set concrete. They planned to proceed anyway. The judge flipped to a photo of my neon string. I see the line, and I see their posts north of it. She set the stack down with that particular finality wood makes when it's listened long enough. TRO granted. The HOA is enjoined from entering Lot 19 for fencing work, from setting concrete anywhere along the disputed line, and from placing materials or equipment on the plaintiff's property. Preserve conditions. If any posts already intrude on Lot 19, remove and fill those holes within 72 hours or present good cause at the preliminary injunction hearing 14 days hence. The association may proceed within Tract C if they obtain any required permits and verify alignment against recorded monuments. Council will meet with the city to ensure drainage compliance. The stamp landed like a kind verdict. Keating's. Mouth made a thin line. The kind fences try to be when the ground tells them a different story. In the hallway, he approached with performative courtesy. "We intend to survey," he said. "If our findings differ, they won't," Nadia said pleasantly. "But by all means read the map." Holly was waiting by my curb when I pulled in. "Heard you got the TRO," she said, jotting the case number on her clipboard. "I'll tag the site." She zip-tied a red notice to the foreman's sawhorse, "Stop work, unpermitted, pending alignment." The foreman saw it and exhaled, like a door unlatching. "We'll pull the 3 on your side," he said to me, tipping his cap. "I'll need a word from management, but—" He glanced at the red tag. "There it is." Bevan appeared, sunglasses on, voice careful. "We'll comply pending council's review," she said, as if the sentence could roll backward once it left her mouth. I walked the neon line, palms open to the afternoon, the hum of it threading through my ribs. Nadia texted, "Good day. Next, make it stick." I looked at the posts like bad thoughts you finally name. "You're moving," I told them. The ground agreed, the way ground does when you finally bring it a judge. They came back with a post puller and a different posture. The foreman lifted his cap when he saw me, the red city tag flapping behind him like a conscience. The puller clamped the first encroaching post, ratchet croaking as it walked the cedar, out of the earth. The sound was oddly tender, like a chair freed from old varnish, followed by the wet gasp of soil remembering its shape. They stacked the posts beside the sawhorses, 3 straight soldiers awaiting reassignment. Holly from Code stood at the line with her clipboard, sunlight silvering the hair at her temple. "No footings in the swale," she reminded no one, and everyone. "Verify alignment, then permit, then build." She glanced at my neon string and gave it a small private nod. I felt the hum of it at my ribs again, thinner now that the worst of the wrong was coming up. But there. Bevan arrived, sunglasses first, apology second. "We'll comply pending council's review," she said. But the sentence sounded less, like a shield and more like a sigh. Kendall hovered with his laptop like a dove that wanted to be useful. "We've scheduled a special meeting tonight," he added. 7 p.m., clubhouse. We'll address this." When the last encroaching post slid free, the holes looked like missing teeth in the lawn. The crew tamped them with the flat sides of their shovels and promised topsoil. "We dug shallow," the foreman said, a little abashed. "Didn't set anything yet. I'll restring along the surveyor's lath after lunch. The jog won't be pretty, but it'll be right." He took 1 step closer. "For what it's worth," he said, eyes meeting mine, "I hate when we build off bad flags." I shook his hand because it felt like a good place to start. At 7, the clubhouse smelled like coffee and cooled anger. Folding chairs made a grid of knees and opinions. The board sat behind a table dressed in a plastic cloth that tried and failed to be formal. Keating, the HOA's lawyer, had left his cufflinks somewhere, which made him look more like a person and less like a desk. Nadia found a seat beside me, pen already uncapped. Bevan opened with a script. "We're here to discuss the perimeter fence project and alignment." She cleared her throat and looked out at the room without her sunglasses. "We set posts over a property line. We've removed them. We intend to reposition within tract C per the survey." The admission landed like rain on a tin roof, small, sharp, and then everywhere. Neighbors spoke. Mr. Cho leaned on the mic stand like a lamppost. "Lines are for peace," he said. "You cross them and it's noise." A mom with a baby strapped to her chest asked if the fence could still keep toddlers from the basin. Holly rose to say yes, with a jog and a permit, and held up a schematic that showed the fence bending away from the swale like a respectful bow. Nadia stood, her voice as even as the survey's line. "We'll memorialize the boundary and the fix," she said, A recorded boundary acknowledgement and a covenant not to encroach, so no future crew has to guess. The association will restore Lot 19, cover reasonable fees, and build within Tract C with drainage review. Then we'll convert the TRO into a stipulated permanent order that simply says, "Stay off what isn't yours." Keating nodded, tired of being wrong. "We can agree to that," he said, and the room loosened in small human ways, people shifting, shoulders dropping, whispering about where the donuts might be. The motion passed 4-1. Bevan voted yes and looked 10 degrees lighter. Kendall typed minutes without drama. Holly penciled a note and handed it to the foreman like a benediction. Permit review, drainage and alignment. The next morning, the crew returned with mason line of their own, bright as mine, strung to Anna's laugh like they'd finally learned to hear the song. The fence jogged near the swale, then ran true along the ribbon of Tract C. They filled the holes on my side with dark, sweet topsoil, seeded the scars, and tucked new rosemary starts into the gap where a post had bruised a branch. The foreman set a pot of lavender on my porch with a note that said simply, "For the bees." Sorry about the line. I walked the corrected run with Nadia on speaker. "Settlements drafted," she said. "Boundary acknowledgement references Anna's instrument numbers and the plat. The HOA signs you sign, we record. They cut you. A check for restoration and part of my invoice. We file the consent order, and this chapter closes." "Kara would like the jog," I said, surprising myself with how gentle her name felt in my mouth. She trusted bends more than straight lines. That afternoon, I planted a handful of zinnia seeds where the soil was still loose, their paper packets whispering in my palm. Mia helped, pressing each seed into the dark with the seriousness of a ritual. When we were done, I pulled the neon string one last time, felt its notes settle from warning into memory, and coiled it into the manila folder with the plat and the deed. Not retired, just resting. As the sun slid low, the new fence cast a shadow in exactly the right place. The basin held its quiet, the rosemary breathed out, and the ground, relieved of arguing, went back to being what it is when we listen to it. Home, with a line that protects more than it divides. Tomorrow we would record paper that remembers. Tonight, Cedar learned to listen. We recorded it on a Thursday, the kind of day that smells like fresh paper and midweek patience. Nadia met me at the county counter with a manila envelope that felt heavier than it was. Inside, boundary acknowledgement and covenant. Not to encroach, whisper. Oaks HOA and Lot 19. Anna's instrument numbers anchored the language like tent stakes. The clerk slid the pages into a flatbed scanner, the glass humming, and then stamped the top page with that soft authority only ink can carry. "Instrument 2025-017384, she said, handing me a receipt that looked like a ticket to a place I already lived. Recorded. We walked it across the street to the courthouse, where the judge turned our temporary into permanent with 2 lines and a signature. "On stipulation," she said, "the association shall not place fencing, posts, footings, or improvements on Lot 19. Alignment shall be verified against recorded monuments. If disputes arise, survey first, build later." The stamp thumped. Paper, now with teeth and a memory. When I got home, a permit board had sprouted by the basin like a conscientious sapling. Holly's initials and Rose's planning stamp sat side by side. The fence jogged around the swale as if remembering that water prefers curves. The foreman tipped his cap. "We ran it on Anna's lath," he said. "Inspector signed off on depth and spacing. We left room for the flow." Bevan came by without sunglasses, coffee in a paper cup and a folded apology in her posture. "We've updated our policy," she said. "Survey verification before construction, alignment photos, drainage review where it matters. We'll post the boundary acknowledgement on the portal so it doesn't get lost." She cleared her throat. "And your restoration check is with Kendall." She paused at the rosemary, touched a new sprig. Lavender for the bees was the right call, she added, almost to herself. Kendall arrived with an envelope, restoration, Anna's fee, a portion of Nadia's invoice, and a smile that looked relieved not to be an argument. "If anything looks off," he said, "call me. We'll fix it before you have to shout." I laughed, because I don't shout, and because it felt good to remember that most problems can be solved before someone has to. That night, the sky bruised purple. The storm rose from the west fast and convinced. Rain slammed the cedar in bright sheets. The basin darkened and swelled, and the jog in the fence proved its lesson in 30 minutes that a board had resisted for 3 weeks. Water ran where it wanted, around the bend, down the swale, into tracked sea's throat, and not into the shallow wounds where posts used to be. From the porch, Mia counted seconds between lightning and thunder and kept losing track, because joy can be loud, too. "The fence listens," she said, small and certain. "It does now," I answered. In the quiet after, we walked the line. The neon string was gone, but the truth it sang stayed, like a song you can hum without the radio. Anna stopped by the next day with a tiny brass plumb bob on a keychain. "For Mia," she said, eyes kind. "Every straight needs a true." Mia held it like treasure, then knelt and pressed 3 zinnia seeds into the seam where the soil was still soft. "For Mom," she whispered, not a question. Neighbors drifted to the jog and made it ours. Mr. Cho brought a folding chair and declared it the best spot to watch summer do its slow work. A mom with a stroller tested the new panel spacing with a tape measure and gave a satisfied thumbs up. The foreman's lavender drew bees that made the air thrum the way the neon line once had, this time with life, not warning. We gathered at the clubhouse one more time, but it was a boring meeting, the good kind. Holly presented a photo of the jog and the inspector's sign-off. Roe talked about respecting hydrology like it was an old neighbor we should greet by name. The board adopted a survey before you sink it rule, 5 to Nero, and Keating drafted a 2-page practice note that boiled down to read the map, then pick up the post driver. People clapped for bureaucracy. I didn't know I had that in me. At A. Home. I slid the recorded acknowledgement into the folder with the deed, the plat, Anna's stamped exhibit, and a photo of the fence bending where the ground asked it to. I tucked Kara's picture behind the plastic so it watched everything without needing to say a word. The folder went back to its shelf. Not because I imagine we're done needing paper, but because memory shouldn't have to carry every truth by itself. On Saturday, the zinnias broke the soil like small, stubborn promises. Mia stuck the plumb bob in the dirt beside them and giggled when it sank straight down, true without trying. I walked the cedar one last time before dinner, hand on wood that finally felt like boundary, not theft. The basin breathed. The rosemary pushed its green into the air. The jog threw a shadow that belonged here. Lines don't keep us apart when we keep them honest. They let us meet without taking. They tell water where to go and people where to stop and start. They turn a fight into a shape a neighborhood can live with. I coiled the last length of neon string and set it beside the manila folder, not retired, just resting, and thought of my father tapping fence posts and saying the only prayer he ever taught me. Trust the pins. Paper remembers. The ground agrees. And if anyone forgets, we have a map that knows our name. If this story resonated, subscribe to HOA USA Stories, hit like, leave a comment, and share it to help more neighbors across the U.S.